Hello, and welcome to the 12th Annual Naples International Film Festival. My name is David Filner, and I'm the Executive Vice President, Artistic Operations at Artis Naples. And on behalf of everyone at Artis Naples and the Naples International Film Festival, I'd like to welcome you here for this very special TalkBack Q&A that is being live streamed. We'd like to thank our TalkBack Q&A sponsors, Stan and Saran Crosshar, for their support. And I'd like to introduce three of the filmmakers from the wonderful drama MATERNA. We'd like to welcome David Gutnik, the director and co-writer, and then two of the producers, Liz Cardenas and Emily McEvoy. Welcome.
Hey.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for taking the time. First of all, since
Should we be on mute?
Pardon?
Sorry, should we be on mute when we're not talking?
It's up to you.
Okay.
First of all, I just wanted to ask, why don't we let people know where we're talking to you from, since I don't believe anyone's here in Naples except for me. Liz, how about you?
I'm currently in Los Angeles right now.
Okay. And David?
I'm in New Haven.
Okay. And Emily?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing this really powerful film. Everyone who's seen this, who's watching this, should have already seen the film, so we're not going to give away any spoilers about it. But it really is an amazing the story of these four women. Can you talk, maybe starting David, with where the idea came from, how the project developed?
Yeah, sure. Thanks to everybody for watching, and thanks David, for your kind words about the film. It started, I was at a place in my life, I would say at my most vulnerable, and I was looking to be more sensitive and honest and direct and vulnerable in my work and in my life, and I wanted to tackle some of what I was going through, some of my experiences in my work for the first time. And I was lucky that I had two other folks in my life, two other people, co-writers, Sol and Jade, who wanted to do the same. So that's how the film started, just intimate conversations about some of our most personal stories and conflicts and traumas. And they sort of gradually evolved into a collaborative script, and Liz and Emily were integral in not only nurturing and supporting, but also in helping to develop that script. And yeah, we just wanted to, the stuff in your life that is the most embarrassing, that you're most afraid to share, that is the source of some of your most private pain, and all the stuff that we don't talk about. That's what we wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm. And Liz and Emily, can you talk about how you first got involved, each one? Maybe Liz first.
So David and I had met in New York at IFP, which is an organization that helps filmmakers. And we both had films that were part of like the IFP Narrative Lab. We met, kind of hit it off, kindred spirits, also kind of discussed being multi-hyphenates. Then we each had a film playing at Sundance and kind of continued to connect. And then when I was back in New York the following year, we hung out, and David had talked to me about this vision that he had. And he kind of expressed, coming off of the Sundance editing lab, he was in a very like highly collaborative, place. And so I really responded to this idea of him where he was writing with these two women. He was, like he said, in this very vulnerable place. I kind of identified with so many of these things that we were talking about and the themes in the story. And I was just really captivated by like this unique story, all these women's stories, and his vision at putting them all together and creating this cohesive story that had so many levels to it. And I just wanted to help him. We actually sat on his stoop in Brooklyn, and I'm not from New York at all, so that's kind of just like a really cool experience, something that I'll treasure forever, talking through the night. And I was like, I'm on board. And then I met Emily, and then he introduced me to Emily because Emily was already part of the project. And then Emily and I met for coffee, and I fell in love with Emily. And it's just been a really, really special experience, both working with these two, you know, amazingly talented, awesome human beings to bringing this story to life. And I'm just really proud of the film.
So, Emily?
I met David at a party at Sundance, truthfully, and he kind of found me, and then we found out we lived in the same neighborhood, and we kind of like work dated for a little bit to kind of like feel each other out. And I started learning about some of the things that he was thinking about and some of the stories that he was exploring internally with Jade and a Soul. And I mean, that's what I love to do about producing. I love just like living and thinking in these imaginative spaces, but the imagination is dictated by our actual experiences in a lot of ways. And so just getting to like play in some of these, I'm just a very naturally curious person. And so kind of getting to know via David, Asol, and Jade's, who they were, and then being able to be a part on the kind of ground level development of what that was going to look like was very interesting to me. And then we started working with Liz, and the rest is kind of history.
Great, thanks. So David, the structure of this film, I think is so interesting, where it's the frame of the subway ride that goes through, and yet in a certain way, it's almost a MacGuffin that sort of tension on the subway train is not the focus of the story that you kind of think it is at the beginning.
Yeah.
How did the idea develop sort of that, oh, hey, I want to have a framing thing and then these 4 stories, or was it like you had 7 stories and you cut them down to 4? How did the structure of it, how did you come up with that?
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. MacGuffin. It's sort of a perfect characterization. Yeah, I'm gonna start using that. Yeah, so at the start, we didn't have this structure for the film. We didn't know that this was the form it was going to take. We had these 4. It started as 4 different stories. There was never 3. There was never 5. It was always 4. They, you know, we were all sort of dealing with similar themes in each of them, and it's like they were little sort of droplets of water that were separate, and then gradually they kind of just gravitated towards each other and, you know, sort of became one. And I would say, yeah, I think by the time we started shooting the second one in Kyrgyzstan, the idea to sort of, I mean, we always knew that we wanted them to live together in some form. We just didn't know what that frame was, whether it was a series or what it was, because they always belonged to each other. They were all sort of always variations on a theme. So yeah, by the time we started shooting the second one, the idea to find to use the train as a way to connect all the characters came to be.
Yeah. So there's sort of, as you had mentioned, there's really interesting, sometimes subtle, sometimes less subtle connections between these stories, other than the sort of general theme. With especially, I mean, I must say, speaking of the Kyrgyzstan thing, I was a decision as an independent filmmakers, and I can't imagine there was, you know, billions of dollars that you had to be doing that. why Kyrgyzstan? Why going to that trouble to have that experience within the context of this film?
Well, again, we were taking our real stories and adapting them into a film. And A Soul's story is set in Kyrgyzstan. We shot in her grandmother's apartment in Bishkek. So, each of the characters that we meet on the train, we're going to where they were just before they got to the train, and that's where Soul's coming from. So,
Yeah.
So the truth, the reality of the situation helped dictate some of our choices.
So you said it was her grandmother's apartment.
Grandmother's apartment, yeah.
That's excellent. So was it difficult from a production standpoint to be doing these? I mean,
No, it was so easy. It was so easy. Sorry, finish your question.
No,
It was not easy, but yeah. Which part?
Well, I mean, the Kyrgyzstan for one thing, but with these four separate things, from when you were producing it, was any more extra complications of having completely different casts, completely different sort of sets and locations for each one of these things?
Who wants to go?
Honestly, there were some challenges, but it was almost like because we did shoot in different segments, and I think that really worked to like keep the individual stories, like to keep the focus on like that individual character. And so having that as the like singular intention each time we went into shooting, I think did something really cool. But like knowing there was like this kind of larger like energetic framework that David was talking about, that is what kept everything cohesive thematically. But I'm trying to think if there were like specific challenges to shooting that separately. And I mean, maybe I've just like blocked out the bad stuff, but honestly, it wasn't that. It was kind of nice. I think it was kind of nice to like upturn the traditional shooting style, the traditional filmmaking style, which is you have, however many days and it's insane and everyone's exhausted. It was kind of nice to split it up. And I think it made for honestly a much more enjoyable experience. I don't know, Liz, do you have anything? Yeah.
I do. No, I agree. And I also think I would almost recommend it to, emerging filmmakers, because it really does make it easier to shoot it in sections, because then you're almost like logistically speaking, because it gives you time into between them, to figure stuff out. Where, I mean, I've been on low budget films that are like, where you're like still producing as you're filming for like later, like you're on week 1 and you're figuring out the location for week 2 or 3 or whatever. So this logistically really made it easier. The harder part was, keeping, like Emily was saying, like the big picture, like seeing that you're in the trees and then seeing the forest for the tone, like making sure the tone matched. And, we were working with 3 different cinematographers. So I do think that's a testament to David's vision, and then us all really being collaborative and talking about it, because, you want to make sure it feels, fluid and the right tone and stuff. And although you're making it specific to each character, so that's where it gets into that kind of the playing that like Emily talked about. So it had its challenges, but I thought it was amazing.
So was it a little bit?
Oh,
go ahead.
Oh,
no, go ahead.
I mean, for anyone who's ever been on a set for like a long period, the first week is kind of like the honeymoon period, and then the second week is still okay, but like start to be some cracks that come in, and then by the third week it's starting to get darker, and then by the fourth and fifth week it's like everyone just wants to kill each other and go home. So we so we kind of got to have 4 honeymoon weeks, so that was nice.
So that's what I was actually going to ask is, so did it feel like you almost did 4 or 5, I guess, short films and then stitched them together? Or was like, what was the timing for it? I mean, did you have a lot of time off in between, or really was it all happening at the same time?
I almost feel like it, yes, you could say it was kind of like that, but I think we did something totally new and different that there is no like definition for it yet. Like I think we are defining it. And so yeah, we did shoot it in 4 different sections, but I wouldn't compare it to necessarily like making filming in 4 shorts.
Uh-huh. And the timing, was there time off though in between?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, first, yeah. There was maybe like 10 days between the first and the second, and then there was about a month between the second and the third, and then another maybe month and a half, maybe 6 weeks between the third and the fourth.
But there was also like holidays in that period too.
Right.
So it was literally like you're shooting in segments of the film, of the overall film, but you're like being very smart about it, you know. And we did have overlap in crew. It's not like we had all new crew every time, you know.
And by holidays, Liz means Sundance. So we went to Sundance, and our cinematographer Greta Zazula had a film at Sundance. So we were prepping. Greta and I were prepping at Sundance, and then flew back to New York, and the next morning we rolled out of bed and went and shot the film.
Emily and I were in Sundance too, so we were definitely
we were all there.
We were all prepping at Sundance. That's so funny. We were like at a Sundance party, being like, "We're in prep right now."
So not a traditional prep either. Slash no prep.
Well, clearly it worked. Whatever you did. So let's talk a little bit about the tone for these various things. I think one of the interesting things, again, the first time that I saw it, is going from that, you know, the subway, and then that the first part is almost a science fiction-y kind of tone to it. Did you want to have a specifically diverse kind of tone for each 4? Again, I know there's through lines, but to have like on one end that sort of science fiction, and I think the third one is sort of a very domestic, very straightforward kind of story. What were your thoughts on the process, or the reasons for that?
Yeah, it's interesting. We didn't really think about them as having these different kind of tonal sort of universes within each of them. I mean, I think, granted, there are naturally, but for example, with that first story, I never really thought of it as a science fiction kind of narrative. First and foremost, it was for me an exploration of a character and her struggle. So like just sort of an existential character study that just so happened to have within it some borderline can be interpreted as science fiction elements. So the emphasis was important. For each of the 4 characters, each of them we were probing to their deepest, darkest, most haunting and haunted problem and selves. So that being the core, each of them trying to find their truth, that being the starting point and foundation, I think gave us some confidence to kind of explore these different kind of tonal spaces, while knowing that grounding would unify them.
So
does that answer?
No, absolutely. That's great. This, I have to admit that when I first saw it, having a male director of this film was a little bit surprising. When I saw at the end, what was it like? Did you have concerns? Obviously, you had 2 female co-writers. You had other women involved in the project. But did you have any how did you approach that? Let's say this
Sure.
particular story, and
Yeah.
let's face it, this particular kind of world we're in these days. How did you approach that?
Well, you know, again, when we first started making this, we weren't quite sure what we were making yet. And all I knew when I was starting this is that I was at a low point, and I was talking to these two other artists, and with the other artists here on this Zoom, and just confessing things about, you know, things we were going through, and these were the people that I felt safest with. And so and we didn't even know that these were all gonna, you know, how they were gonna live together within the film. So, you know, it just wasn't really that kind of strategic. It was just honestly just like I was looking to heal, and so were my friends who I was working with. So that was the start. And then once it got going, you know, I think having you know, co-writing this with Jade and the Soul really helped. You know, by the time we got to set where I was directing the film, you know, we had already worked through so much together as co-writers. And, you know, Jade and the Soul were also playing themselves in the film. So just I saw part of my job, if not a large part of my job, as just kind of giving them the space to take ownership over that, and, you know, being there when they needed me, but for the most part, kind of getting out of the way, you know, and just trying to create as much of a safe space for them to explore their personal stories as best I could. Yeah.
So with Jade and the Soul, there's some explicit biographical aspects of these stories, or
Yeah.
was it being the director? You'd gone through, I assume, some sort of, you know, with the process of them writing it, you get the words on paper, and then get on set, and you are the director of it, directing them, telling in a certain way their own story. Were you more, I guess, aware of the fact that this was not only a co-writer, but someone who had sort of lived part of the story when you were actually doing the direction portion, and maybe being more extra collaborative in the direction for them?
Yes, of course. Yeah, there was no, you know, this was a very touchy-feely collaborative process. You know, we would write, we would cry, we would take a break, we'd go back, we'd write, we'd cry, take a break, you know, so it was very, there was no getting around and, you know, forgetting that this was the origin and root of the project. And so, so yeah, I mean, when we got to set, especially with those two vignettes, they were still sort of dealing with what we were exploring, and so they were always so full. You know, we talk about emotional preparation for an actor. There wasn't much emotional preparation they needed to get into character. It was, you know, they were real sort of live wires. So, you know, it was part. Yeah, my job was to be as supportive of that, and to create as much of a space in which they felt they could explore. And I hope what you see in the film is that they were able to do that with some degree of liberty.
Mm-hmm. And for you, I mean, obviously this is a personal, you know, you've expressed that it was personal. Would you be willing to share where you are in this, in the four stories? Is there somewhere that's related to you?
Yeah, the third story.
Right. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And are you the brother?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
A version of, yes, yeah.
So, has I assume there's some sort of familial situation that's similar to that. I don't mean to press if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean there is some similarity there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Have
you know.
you, and for Jade and Asol, have your families who are, I assume, reflected in some way in these films, have they seen the film? And if so, what kinds of reactions have you gotten?
The families have not seen the film.
Okay. And that's intentional?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, uh, great. So
healing is a multi-step process. You know, you can't necessarily take it all on. You can't force other people. I don't want to speak for you, David, but you can't force other people to, you know, tackle things that you're trying to tackle, even some of the closest people in our lives. And I'm not saying that this is true for Jade, Asol, and David, but I do just think, like, generally we all deal with and cope with things in our own ways, in our own time. And so, you know, I think that's what this movie is a reflection of, is like these storytellers, these artists, like looking to kind of dive in and hoping people will respond to that action that's being taken.
Yeah. Well, they are, I mean, all four of them are such powerful stories and really, really moving in their own ways. For Emily and Liz, a little bit, in supporting these artists who are, I mean, such a personal project, clearly, for David and the other writers. Did it make it easier to be supporting something that's so personal, or was it not having your own stories, involved in it? Did you feel like you were not part of the club of the three who were, so much about them in your working having to produce it?
I think that's a really interesting and complicated question in terms of, like, the role of the creative producer. And ultimately, I think it depends on the people you're working with and whether they're, and just the intimacy of those relationships. And is there, like, space being created for you to bring in your own perspective? And there always was on this project. I don't know that I felt like left out. I think there's sometimes like I mean, ultimately I was just, it doesn't always, there's like cathartic ways to experience the healing of other people, like through proximity, and you can always relate it back to yourself, whether you're doing it like on camera or like internally. I think that's like part of the process of being a producer. I don't know, Liz, what would you add to that?
That was perfect. Yeah, like I think, as like she's saying, as a creative producer, it's like we're wanting to be there to support the vision and support and kind of do what David was talking about, just creating a safe space so that everyone on set, both cast and crew, feels safe, comfortable. It was a very intimate experience where David worked really closely in soft moments with his actors, and the crew was very collaborative, and we just wanted to create a really safe, intimate environment, which is what I think we were able to do.
What do you think, and I pose this to all three of you, what was your biggest, I guess, learning takeaway from going through this experience of making this beautiful film? What are you going to take most from it, that you learned the most from doing this film?
I mean, honestly, it's like the beautiful thing is, the idea of thinking outside the box and exploring and pushing boundaries. And then therefore that's where like both the magic happens and growth happens on personal and creative ways. But the thing I've learned the most is unfortunate is trying to sell a movie during COVID and having your film premiere during COVID. And this has been definitely like a very, so many times we would talk to people and they're like, I'm sorry to say that this is unprecedented, but this is unprecedented. And so it's like, I feel like, they joke about being on set as being like in battle together, right? So like, the three of us are in battle together, like, but we've kind of been in battle together during this whole process too, because it's been, having everything lead up to this premiere in New York City. We shot the movie, and then Tribeca not happening, and then us really figuring out how to, get this movie to audiences. And I definitely think we all felt something about the movie in our hearts. But then with everything going on in the world, we're like, oh my gosh, this is also extremely timely. Like, these conversations in the movie are the conversations that people should be having right now in their homes or with families and friends. So there's this thing of like, wow, it's touching on something so deep in us, and it could be for other people. And so we're just excited about trying to get it, help people connect with one another, because like David was saying, he kind of gravitated to these people, these artists that he's working with, for connection. And then we create this piece of art hoping that people will connect with it, and then other humans will connect based off of this movie.
I can go. I definitely echo that. Big learning opportunity in how to release a film during the pandemic. Hopefully not something we'll have to do again. I feel like I'm learning what it means to like surrender to the will of a film and not try and, this was such an unusual project, and it is what it is because we didn't try and force it into a box that existed prior to. So I think like finding that balance of like, what does this movie want to be, with also trying to like guide it, is like a really cool experiment. And then also in that, like in working in a very nebulous way, communication is just like so important in dealing with other humans, and finding healthy, supportive, clear ways to communicate has been like a big learning curve, opportunity, lesson.
David, any thoughts?
Yeah, so many. I love everything you guys have said. Yeah, I don't know. I think for a while I was saying things like, if you feel something really strongly, like so strong, like to the bone, to the core of the bone, to the rawest center, if you really feel it, and you're in pain, or you feel intense, it doesn't have to be pain, it could be whatever, joy, anything, agony, doesn't matter, conflict, anxiety, whatever it is, if you feel it really intensely, and in your work you give voice to that, but really give voice to it, like really go there and express it as fully as can be expressed, that somebody out there will respond, because somebody out there is no doubt feeling or going through similar things. So there's no sound in a vacuum. But you don't really know until you know. And I feel like with this, I felt a little bit of, I saw that happen. And so for me, I'm energized to try and to sort of double down and do more work in which I'm pushing myself, and to be as honest and vulnerable as I can be, and to work with other people that want to do that as well. I think people talk about it takes a village. People talk about the collaborativeness of this. I think we were really, 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 really rigorous about who it is that we we're working with in the team, every single position. And I want to say not necessarily the best person, but the right person. But it just so happened that the right person was also the best. But there's so many bests. There's so many great people out there. You have to be really specific about it being a right match. And so, and I think in sports there's the metaphor. It's team beats talent. But I'm gonna everyone was super talented, but the team really was. I'm going to do my best to try and match what we did in terms of team building, because it's everything. It really is everything.
Right. Well, so to sort of close up a little bit, you referenced it a bit, but can you tell us sort of what is happening with the film, the other plans for the film, and then what are your personal next projects, your professional projects that we should be looking out for?
I'll just jump in real quick. All's well that ends well. Film is going to have a release. We can't really talk about who, what, where, what with, but yeah, good things.
And then for you, do you have other projects in the works already, or?
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually developing a script with one of the co-writers with A Soul. We're working on a script at the moment on a project, and one other that I'm just starting to write. I'm a little further along on the one I'm co-writing with A Soul, but yeah, that's another thing. The idea of using some kind of story that's rooted in reality, and working with a person who's gone through some of that was a really inspiring way for me to work. I really felt like I could thrive in that model, and so I'm working that way again. I love this idea of sort of trying to inject a kind of documentary energy within a sort of cinematic narrative framework, and working within the tension and dialogue between those two, trying to occupy the same space.
Liz or Emily?
Obviously, David answered that exciting things are coming for MATERNA, which we're really happy about. And then I just shot a narrative feature film, like outside Los Angeles. We're in post right now in LA. And, as I mentioned earlier, David and I responding as like multi-hyphenates, I also write and direct and act. And so I have a feature script that I wrote that I'm looking to make, and I'm working with our cinematographer, Greta Zozula. I'd worked with Greta on a feature before, so MATERNA was my second feature with her. And so we're working on a project that hopefully we can make soon.
Right. And Emily?
More of the same. I have a film actually that came out this weekend called Radium Girls that you can watch online. And then I'm in post on a film. And yeah, like I said, more of the same. But do follow us on Instagram, MATERNA the movie, if you are interested in, if you've watched the film and you liked it and you want to recommend it, you can follow us on Instagram to know what's happening next.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been great. The film, thank you for sharing the film with our audiences. It really is it's a really powerful, heartfelt film. So congratulations and thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to our audience. There's still time to watch other films. The festival ends tonight. So thanks again for being here, and we're gonna call it a wrap.